$12. That's what the panel costs. A Harbor Freight 25-watt solar kit, item 63585, $12 to $20 depending on the sale. Add an $11 charge controller, a battery, a $1 fuse, and a few feet of wire. And you've built a small machine that pulls electricity out of the sky and keeps your phones and lights alive through a blackout that takes everybody else dark. The whole thing runs $28 if you've got a battery to salvage, about $70 if you buy new. I'm going to build it with you right now, part by part, price by price, and I'll show you the one wiring mistake that fries a controller in 3 seconds. But first, let me kill the word in the title, because honesty is the whole point of this channel. It is not infinite. Nobody honest tells you that. What it is a trickle of power that comes back every day the sun shows up, and in a long outage that beats a generator that runs dry on day 2. Here's why this matters, and I'll keep it short, because the build is the point. When the grid goes down, the average home is fine for a few hours. It's hour 72 that sorts the ready from the rest. That's not my number, that's the official planning assumption. FEMA's own guidance assumes you're on your own for the first 3 days. And the grid they expect to carry you isn't young. The American Society of Civil Engineers grades the nation's infrastructure on a report card, and the energy systems came back with a D+. A D+. That's the grade you get when the examiner is being kind about how close to failing you came. The Department of Energy logged more than 180 major outage events in a single recent year, and that number has been climbing most of a decade. We keep bolting more demand onto older wire, electric cars, data centers, heat pumps, while the maintenance that would keep it standing gets put off another year, because nobody wants to pay today for a failure that lands next decade. So the question isn't whether the lights go out, it's whether you've got a little of your own power when they do. Now, the part nobody remembers. This isn't new, it's recovered. Before the lines reached the countryside, rural American families ran their homes off their own electricity, and they ran them well. Sears sold a complete home power system out of the catalog starting back in 1916, the Delco light plant. A small engine charged a bank of batteries, and those batteries ran the lights and the radio all day without a grid anywhere in sight. Out on the plains, families used wind, Jacobs wind chargers, spinning over the barn, filling a battery bank in the cellar. By the time the Rural Electrification Administration strung wire to most farmhouses, through the 1940s and into the 1950s, this was just ordinary knowledge. Then the grid came, and here's the piece of the history that never gets told. The co-ops that brought the wire didn't let you keep the old battery bank as a backup. You converted fully. The utilities wanted a metered customer, not a half-independent household, because a family that can meet some of its own needs is a family that might decide to meet more. So the framing became modern versus backward. Throw the old system out, you're connected now. And within a generation, almost everybody had. I think about Dale when I tell that story, a composite of a man I've heard from 100 times, a retired lineman out in rural Ohio, 40 years on the polls. Dale says the same thing those men always say. The grid is a miracle and a house of cards, both, and the public has no idea how thin the margin is. The men who fixed it keep a little power of their own, always have. We didn't lose this knowledge because it stopped working. We lost it because we stopped needing it. And the day you need it again, $12 on a Saturday afternoon puts a piece of it back. So let's build it. 4 parts do the real work. A panel to catch the sun, a controller to manage the power so it doesn't cook the battery, a battery to hold it, and a way to get it back out. Think of it like a rain barrel. The panel is the gutter, the battery is the barrel, the controller is the valve that keeps the barrel from overflowing and splitting. Once you see it that way, it stops being intimidating. Part 1, the panel, $12 to $20. And here's the honesty beat right away. 25 watts is small. On a bright summer day, aimed right, it makes near its rating. On a gray February afternoon, the day you actually need it, maybe a third of that. Let me give you the real seasonal numbers, because I'd rather you have accurate expectations than inflated ones. A 25-watt panel on a clear summer day, angled well, puts back somewhere around 100 to 140 watt hours. The same panel on a clear January day with the sun low and the days short drops closer to 50 or 60, and on a heavy overcast winter day, maybe 20. The internet loves a tiny panel running a whole house. That is a lie. What this genuinely does is keep phones, lights, and a radio alive indefinitely, topping the battery back up day after day. Want more? Buy a bigger panel. 100 watt runs $60 to $90 and does 4 times the work. Start with the small one to learn the system. Then scale the panel when you're ready. Part 2, the charge controller, about $11, the cheapest part and the brain of the whole thing. A basic 10 amp controller takes the wild variable power off the panel and feeds it to the battery gently, then shuts the flow when the battery's full so you don't boil it. You'll see fancier ones called MPPT controllers that squeeze more out of the panel. They're real, they're better, and for a panel this small, they're not worth the extra money. A $10 PWM controller is the right tool here. $11 protecting a $50 battery. You never skip it. The folks who wire a panel straight to a battery to save $11 are the folks buying a new battery next month. Part 3, the battery. And listen close, there's a safety line here. You want a sealed AGM battery, absorbed glass mat. A 35 amp hour AGM runs about $49. Why AGM and not the cheaper flooded battery from the auto parts store? Because a flooded battery, the wet kind, with caps you can open, vents hydrogen gas when it charges. Hydrogen is flammable, and indoors, in a closed room with no air moving, a charging flooded battery is a real hazard. A sealed AGM recombines those gases internally under normal charging, which is exactly why it's the one you bring inside. The rule is simple. Flooded wet cell batteries stay in the garage or outside, never the bedroom, never a closet. Sealed AGM is the one that's safe in the living space. And even with AGM, you give it air, you don't seal it in an airtight box, and you don't overcharge it, which is the whole reason that controller exists. Part 4, getting the power out. A 12-volt dual USB car adapter, about $5, turns this into a charging station for phones and tablets, and if you've already got one in your car, you own this part. The single most important small piece, a 10 amp inline fuse with a holder, $1 at any auto parts store, mounted on the wire close to the battery. That dollar fuse is the difference between a safe little system and a fire. And I want you to understand why. Because it's not optional. A 12-volt battery can dump several hundred amps into a dead short in an instant. If a wire works loose and touches bare metal, if a connection bridges positive and negative, that current flows all at once. And at that amperage, wire vaporizes and fires start. The fuse blows before any of that happens. $1 every time. Rounded out with about $4 of 12 gauge wire. 12 gauge because thinner wire on a high current line heats up, and a couple bucks of ring connectors, and you've got every part. Salvaged battery, $28 to $32 total. New AGM, $68 to $72. Every item real, every price real. Now the assembly, and stop here a second, because this is the one most people get wrong. The order of the connections matters in a way that isn't obvious. You connect the battery to the controller first. The controller needs to see the battery and learn its voltage before it ever sees the panel. Connect the panel first, let the controller wake up staring at solar input with no battery behind it, and a lot of these cheap controllers fault or fry. 3 seconds, $10, gone. I learned that one the hard way. Years back, wired the panel in first and killed the controller before the coffee was cold. So the sequence never changes. Battery to controller first, then panel, then your load. And tearing down, you reverse it. Panel off first, battery off last. Battery first on, battery last off. Step 1, mount the inline fuse on the positive wire off the battery, close to the terminal. Step 2, run that fused positive and the negative to the controller's battery terminals. Nearly every controller is marked with a little battery symbol, a panel symbol, a load symbol. Watch polarity, red to positive, black to negative. When the controller senses the battery, the display lights up, that's your confirmation it's alive. Step 3, connect the panel to the controller's panel terminals, and in daylight, you'll see a charging light come on. The display usually shows you a stage, bulk, while it's pushing hard into a low battery, absorption as it tops off gentle, and float when the battery's full, and it's just trickling to hold it there. When you see float, you're full. Step 4, plug the USB adapter into the load terminals. That's it. A panel on the windowsill or the porch rail, a small box of electronics on the table, a battery quietly filling every day the sun shows. If you want to run something that needs regular wall current, a lamp, a small fan, add a 100-watt inverter for about $20, and you've got an outlet too. Let me be straight about what it actually runs, because the honesty is why you're still here instead of watching a channel that lies to you. And these are numbers you can verify with a cheap watt meter, not numbers I'm guessing. A fully charged 35 amp hour battery holds roughly 400 watt hours, and you only want to lean on about half of that to keep it healthy over the long haul. A 5-watt LED bulb off a full charge runs the better part of 3 days of evenings. A modern phone charges somewhere around 20 to 28 times from flat. A weather radio drawing a couple of watts runs 2 to 3 days straight. A small 12-volt fan, the kind you'd want in summer heat, runs most of a day. And for a lot of you, this next one isn't a detail. A travel-style CPAP with a 12-volt input draws around 30 watts and runs a full night off this battery, then tops back up the next day from the panel. What it does not run is your refrigerator, your furnace, your space heater, or your well pump. Those pull 100 to 200 watts and more continuously, and any video telling you a $12 panel runs your fridge is lying flat out. Know what the tool is for. This one keeps you informed, lit, reachable, and for some of you, keeps a medical device running. Heating and cooling and refrigeration is a different conversation and a much bigger budget. I think about Patricia on that medical point, a composite, a retired nurse's aide down in Kentucky, the kind who spent 40 years watching what happens to people when the simple things fail. Patricia doesn't worry about the dramatic stuff. She worries about the oxygen concentrator, the CPAP, the insulin that needs to stay cool. And she's right to, because in a long outage, those quiet little power draws are the ones that turn a manageable 2 weeks into a dangerous one. She keeps one of these small systems not to power a house, but to power one machine and a phone. And she'll tell you that's the difference that matters most for the people she looks after. If there's a medical device in your home, build the system around that first. Everything else on it is a bonus. There's a comm side too, and I think of Stan there, a composite, a hobby ham radio operator out in Nebraska who's been talking to strangers across the dark for decades. Stan's whole point is that in a real outage, information is the scarcest thing in the neighborhood. Not food, not water, not on day 3, information. Who's open, where the shelter is, when the water's safe again, whether help is actually coming or just promised. A charged phone and a running radio are how you stay inside the loop instead of outside it, guessing. Stan keeps his radios fed off exactly this kind of small battery bank, because the radio that's dark when everyone else is dark is no radio at all. About that salvage battery, since somebody's going to ask, and this is where you save the most money. You can sometimes pull a usable one out of an old uninterruptible power supply, the kind that sits under a desk, or a wheelchair or scooter battery, or even a tired car battery that won't crank an engine anymore, but still holds plenty for this gentle duty. The honest catch is, it's a gamble, so you test it, and the test is 30 seconds. Multimeter on DC volts, red to positive, black to negative, nothing else connected. That's the resting voltage. A healthy 12-volt battery reads around 12.5 to 12.7. 12.4 to 12.6, still good. Down around 12.2, partly depleted but probably workable. Below 12 flat, it's tired and may not recover. Below 11.8, don't build your emergency system on it. A dead battery stays dead no matter how much sun you give it. If you want more confidence, charge it full, put a small load on it, and watch how fast the voltage sags. A good battery holds above 12 volts a good while under load. One that drops to 11.5 in the first 10 minutes has very little real capacity left. And the one safety line on Salvage: never charge an old flooded battery sealed up indoors, for the hydrogen reason. Salvage for the savings, respect what you're handling. A couple of practical notes on getting the most out of it. Where you put the panel matters more than people think. South facing is best across the continental United States. That's where the sun spends its day. East or west loses you maybe 20%, still plenty for this. Tilt the panel up off flat at roughly your latitude. Call it 35 degrees through the middle of the country, steeper up north, flatter down south, and you don't need to fuss over it daily. A steeper angle in winter and a flatter one in summer, adjusted twice a year, is more than enough. A scrap of angle iron, a couple of bungee cords, or a wooden stake gets you there for nothing. And keep it clean. A panel under a film of pollen or dust quietly loses output, and a wipe with a damp rag buys it back. When you're ready for more, you scale the same simple system instead of replacing it. A second battery wired in parallel doubles your storage. A bigger panel, 100 watts for $60 to $90, quadruples what you put back each day, which is what you want if you're running that medical device or charging for the whole family. You don't throw the small system out, you grow it. That's the beauty of building it yourself instead of buying a sealed box. And here's a second honesty beat, because I promised you those. You'll see slick all-in-one power stations advertised hard, the briefcase-looking units, $300, $500, $1,000. Some are genuinely good, but understand what you're paying for: convenience and a brand, not magic. The one I just walked you through does the same core job. Store some sun, run your essentials for a fraction of the price, and because you built it, you can fix it, expand it, and you actually understand it. There's no shame in buying the convenient box if that's what gets you to act. Just don't believe you can't be ready without spending $500, because you can be ready for $30. A word to one person watching. If you're the one in your family who thinks about this, the one your kids tease, the one your spouse calls a worrier, you're not paranoid, you're early. A box that catches sunlight and keeps the phones alive isn't doom. It's the same instinct your grandparents had with the batteries in the cellar. It's a spare tire. You don't keep a spare because you expect a flat tomorrow. You keep it because you can't predict the day and you'd rather not be stranded. This is a spare tire for your home's electricity. Nobody gets to make you feel foolish for that. I'll give you the expensive lesson story, the composite kind. There's a couple I think of as the ones who learned the generator lesson the hard way. They did the responsible thing on paper, bought a big gas generator, felt covered, parked it in the shed. Then a long ice storm came, and they learned 3 things fast. It was loud enough the whole street knew exactly who had power. It drank gasoline they couldn't refill, because the stations were down too. And it couldn't run safely indoors. Running it in an attached garage is exactly how people die of carbon monoxide every winter. So on the coldest nights, it sat silent because nobody wanted to wrestle it out into the ice. The thing that actually carried them was the small stuff. Stored battery power for phones and light. The generator was the expensive lesson. The cheap battery bank was the quiet hero. I'm not saying generators are useless. A properly run generator outside, well away from the house, is a real tool. I'm saying people buy in backwards. The loud, expensive thing first. The cheap basics last. Build the basics first. So here's what it changes in a real 2-week grid down stretch. Day 1, everybody's fine, phones still charged from before. Day 2, the neighborhood's phones start dying, and with them goes everybody's information and everybody's calm. Day 3 through 7, the panel's replenishing what you use each day, breaking even in good sun, drawing down the reserve on cloudy days, and you're starting to learn which loads matter and which don't. Day 8 through 14, you're managing on purpose. The phone gets charged once a day instead of always. The light runs 2 hours in the evening instead of all night. And the radio stays on, because information is the thing the system protects best. A charged phone in that stretch is the difference between knowing the boil water notice and not knowing it, between finding the open pharmacy and driving blind, between reaching the family member who comes to get you and sitting alone in a house dropping 2 degrees an hour. That's the real product here, not watts, calm. Here's the whole assignment, and it's small. This week, just get the panel and the controller, about $25 together. Get the battery when you can. Build it on a Saturday afternoon. Give it 30 or 40 minutes, and check it once a season after that. I've replaced exactly 1 controller in years of running these. And then you'll have, sitting quietly in your window, a forgotten piece of engineering your great-grandparents would have recognized on site. The industry's answer to a failing grid is a $20,000 wall battery. This is a $12 panel in an afternoon. Both work. The difference is who can afford which one. Prepared is a calm word. Keep it that way. Tell me in the comments if you've got an old battery in the garage you could test. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.